Welcome to the channel with more likes and views and sometimes countdowns views. And first I want to welcome the first responders who always watch my video first. That's the artificial intelligence audit for BlackRock, and they sent afterwards the YouTube Trust and Safety Team artificial intelligence when they are banning me. It's despite also the People Liberations Army from China, which since Biden tells the FBI whom to arrest because Biden is the unifier. He didn't say whom he will unify. Gatekeepers of those truths the state recommends to believe. This reminds me to the good old times of Der Stürmer or Pravda. Honestly, I'm against a global Putinistan and not paid by the FSB. Actually, and for the original, I'm actually for an original version of Europe with nations and their cultures intact, following human rights, which I define like the first version of 1948. So regarding invasion, no thanks. I remember the 2014 clip when the trusted slow media showed shooting down of an helicopter, but we didn't have audio. And later when we heard the audio, it weren't really Ukrainians singing the "Ayay Snekba." Also contrary to the Minsk peace, in my opinion, would be to allow regularly that racial nationalists like Azov regards bomb Ukrainians because their mother tongue is Russian. These attacks are neither now nor had they been in the last continuous 8 years acceptable. But I have a personal bias against explosives rock stuffs in the street, because I think it's against human rights to blow civilians up. And I also think it didn't have to have the Polaris 2021 exercises in front of Russia and then sending Kamala Harris to welcome Ukraine into the NATO soon after Ukraine announced to take back the island Crimea. I understand the island Crimea had been in the 10th century Jewish kingdom, but by the Torah, the only place to claim on the whole of the world is only Israel for a Jewish person. So I admire the toughness of Zelensky's vlog videos in the streets of Kiev during war, like my green palace in here. Of course, Olaf Scholz had laughed when this massive attacks from the last 8 years had been called a genocide. Olaf Scholz was also heavily implicated in the bank corruption scandal of Wirecard and Marburg Bank and is so deeply guilty that he wouldn't be acceptable as a candidate for public office if German law or European law would have been applied in the last elections, which de facto excluded usually every German living lawfully registered outside of the influence zone of the remake of the Aktuelle Kamera in ARD and ZDF. Aktuelle Kamera had been the news of the it was called Democratic Republic of Germany and was communist. Even in every simple game of chess, a losing strategy is to declare the other player an unmotivated fool. Only in this chess game, the pieces are hydrogen bombs. And you have in one round, you have 8 fusion bombs, and each bomb uses only to have an imagination. Their trigger mechanism is an atom bomb. But you only need 2 of those bombs to bring together or melt together, like amalgam, lava, all of European people's buildings, streets, and every vegetation, every life. But then you have no Hobbit afterwards. But also you can't sell any vaccinations. And now when they in Boston lab produced an 80% lethal Omicron variant, for that a total of 2 rats more had been tested as for the last Omicron symptom moderator for your kids. That doesn't sell so good at the moment. We see the priorities clear, only the effort. 10 rats for killing, 8 rats for testing. I don't prefer to resolve difference by coercion, proselytism towards an ideology, religion, or violence, that is to say the methods of war, but to resolve the problems in a deal, an agreement. Because of this, I mean stuff like no war but peace deals, I prefer Trump to Joe Robin Bidon, and because in the unedited clip addressing media, in times when Trump added,
and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
That in his opinion, neo-Nazis shouldn't even have a right to exist, and at this moment Biden decided to run for president in honor of his mentor Roger Burt of the KKK with Grand Wizard. Biden got totally correctly voted in office between 1 and 4 o'clock in the morning by vampires, which are in the cinema world known to be invisible for mirror reflection and cameras. And you always see him shaking hands with one of the representatives of the undead after the speech. Here. And in the so-called Dinesh D'Souza documentary, they do not respect that this electrode moves very quickly and is again invisible for the cameras. Here an example would teach how it looked in reality like. So, as a good citizen, I believe everything you tell me, since thanks to the woke theory, I became recently white. So, 30% of the weapons delivered to Ukraine arrive there in the hands of the army, indeed. In the state of where Zelensky is the Ukrainian Obama. Because Obama was elected despite being black and despite the history that the United States had with blacks. And then, but the Americans didn't get a Peace Nobel Prize for overcoming their prejudice, but Obama did in advance for bombing. And compared to that, Zelensky is Jewish and was elected by Ukrainians despite their history. And the two, Obama and Zelensky, have reacted to their opposition with imprisonment. From Jew to Jew. Dear Mr. Zelensky, from Jew to Jew, the Torah commands us to listen to both sides in every conflict, not to imprison one side. In any case, the president of the Ukraine reached the moral equivalent of Putin and all the other Klaus Schwab alumni that usually enjoy their leisure despotism. The remaining 70% of the armament, there are, and it's like a situation like in Yugoslavia in 1990s, and regarding Murphy's Law, these weapons soon will find themselves in the worst possible hands. Now, Nord Stream pipeline, which was first blocked by Trump and allowed by Joe Biden, that somebody could afford to rearm himself. Clearly, the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up 100% by Putin because he couldn't remember how to turn off the tap in Russia, and then he personally boarded a two-man submarine to fix one pipe a bit and to offer Germany Russian gas. And Germany could hide the insufficiency of their public bird hackers or windmills to produce electricity by using Russian gas or diesel generators in relay. Therefore, Germans were ordered to use gasoline only. Don't need additional raw oil when all gasoline goes to cars and the diesel as green energy. And this new offer from Russia was refused. After repairing the pipeline, he blew himself up and he went with his own submarine down there. Because it is much more ethical to buy Russian gas and oil from China, which makes their margin of profit then useful to continue to incarcerate their population in a better test for Europe. When you pull back to feudalism, the reset, like. As long-time member of the French-Chinese Cultural Association, Macron allowed, as Minister of Economy, already in 2014, CCP police stations in France where you can ask for more details, so be brave. The thing with nuclear war is it's as reliable as to bring a nuclear power plant up to date only every 60 years, which you do with your car. If you drive a car, why repair it? For 60 years, you simply drive, nothing will happen. And the Italian, but why say that? Because the Italian physician Fermi had used graphite in the 1920s, like in Chernobyl, and Chernobyl 6 days later blew them up. But the radioactive clouds, according to French media, made a U-turn at the French border because they had been afraid to pay too much customs. In the 1960s, Fukushima was built, and 60 years later, 2011, something like that, tsunami, kaboom. Air France has not updated their Concorde planes either, though they never been used nuclear, but also maybe not modernizing and no maintenance is the problem, just an idea. On the other hand, the radioactivity after a strategic nuclear bomb, that are the tiny ones that have only the force to destroy Hiroshima, like Paris goodbye, this radioactivity is wanted. And Mr. Struck, if the Russian nuclear arsenal, which is 200 times larger than all of the United States, France and Israel together, would be all pipe bursts, the missiles that explode on the spot, then we have a nuclear winter when all the sky lets no light in, globally. Have you seen The Matrix? That also means no more money to earn with ESG, apart from the fact that they have minus 50 degrees Celsius. For those who don't know Celsius, that's 223.15 Kelvin. Okay, it's minus 58 Fahrenheit. But you have that refreshing temperature 24/7 everywhere. And but all life is radiated and dead. But life on Earth is carbon-based, and you know carbon. The maximum radioactivity will be over after 30 years, and it is completely safe to go out of your bunker after 10,000 years. You have saved the planet from humanity and all vegetation. Maybe a new breed of mold with consciousness will appear, or bipedal fungus will greet you when you go out. And despite everything, you declare there that the Russians, in particular Putin, is too stupid to close his shoelaces, but mature and reasonable enough to make nuclear irresponsible decisions. And Putin, he's not an ideologue. Like communist China, you know that Mao Zedong answered about a loss of 300 million Chinese people in case of a nuclear war, so what? But Putin is in favor of a terroristic imperium, not like the border Tsars. And how had the historic real Tsar read when the Napoleonic troops had been in front of Moscow? In order to not find a single grain of food or anyone to ask anything, the chief of the military of the Russian military at the time, General Kutuzov, decided to burn everything down. I mean, everything and everybody. And in front of a desert of ashes, we French had the choice to die on the spot or to return. And Russian history, this was considered a victory. And that's in the collective memory. So the idea, let's exclude a reaction because it can be unfavorable for themselves if you put them back at the wall. With this collective memory, it's totally possible. Then you say, yeah, last atomic crisis was with Khrushchev in the Cuba Missile Crisis. And Khrushchev was an ideologue who wanted to proselytize towards global communism, the world. So he had more to lose in the Cuban crisis than Mother Russia. Yes, he was not thinking like the Tsar. Yeah? Everyone ridiculed now Trump when he demanded in his office a realization of the NATO. And now NATO has, for 1,500 euros per person, hired the war criminals of ISIS to participate in the war in this time Kiev, not in Paris, that's later. Believing that they are only idiots that like to fight and to die without an ideology that wants something like a global caliphate. For example, we had an unfortunate gruesome murder now in France last weekend of a schoolgirl. And of course, instead of the cruel crime to criticize ideologic passages, it's better to say that they are, because they are from a certain region, genetically deficient and can't help themselves. So for me, that's more racist to criticize people they are deficient by genetic design than say, okay, the ideology that says you can do it. So what was the idea regarding the rearmament of the Taliban by the NATO when Joe Biden left? And also all partners of NATO had been left there with the Taliban in the rain of bombs to be exact. I thought leaving NATO, what the French presidential candidate Eric Zemmour had proposed, me as a military beat, was totally irresponsible. But following someone who caused the United States...
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to excuse me.
Troubling, huh? Donbass issues had been ignored by Joe Biden, and the old Hunter Biden laptop conspiracy turns out to be true, but there are no financial interests besides that he is... Also, as he said to China, genocide is a cultural thing.
I'm not going to speak out against what he's doing in Hong Kong, what he's doing with the Uyghurs in western mountains of China, and Taiwan trying to end the one China policy by making it forceful. I said, and by the way, he said he gets it. Culturally, there are different norms at each country.
As answer to please don't expect NATO to in front of our doors, as even in 2016 Hillary Clinton suggested a Syria no-flight zone, aka we will shoot down Russian fighters to open a war with Russia. So who had expected that? The result is, while financing Iran, which finances civil war in Yemen, And suddenly 4,000 rockets had been launched against Israel by Hamas that looked exactly like the Iranian Shahab 2. And Iran also opened a drone factory to bomb Israel, but these drones are a lookalike of the drones that are now suicide bombing Kiev. That means drones aren't alive. But no, you think you make a digital clone and then you get murdered and you get replaced by a clone and it's living forever because you are a Borg or something like that. I doubt it very much. And Iran is in the CCP Russian BRICS system financially and has common military exercises. And while the West celebrates once a year the hijab day, Iranian religious police kills women for not wearing tight enough an hijab. Okay, you can say the only collapse after a rude police interrogation when offered the next one for the panties below the long skirt. As the prophet said, don't hit a woman in the face, for it renders them ugly. But apparently as it goes. Without defining what to defend, we must, in case that not everybody gets vaporized, I think we should not think that an army is only toy robots in the trunk of an oligarch like President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen, with her husband who produces for Pfizer since he's the director of the subcontractor, organizes a mandatory product to inject for all. In a banana republic, this would be already a reason to be made to resign. Apart from intimidating entire nations with sanctions if they vote for a president that may not support the re-election of herself. Because in Europe, the head of governments elect the Commission of the European Union, and after 5 years, they re-elect. Who may not support the re-election of Ursula. Only aside that if somebody, therefore the European system, you have the President of the European Union is elected by the heads of governments, and which are 4 years in office except France, and then after 5 years, totally new electorship will then vote again for Ursula. And if the candidate is voted into office who might not support her,
I wanted to ask, are there any concerns regarding the upcoming Italian election?
It is a constant work in progress. We're never done. It's never safe. But you are in the European Council and all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, my future and my well-being is also depending on all the 26 other ones. I've spoken about Hungary and Poland. We have tools. People as a body that is always where always governments have to be accountable to, play an important role.
So what this, if not everybody is vaporized, you need an army, and the army are not from the Toy Story, but people, they need to believe that they defend something. For example, what could they defend? Freedom. How freedom by respecting the Nuremberg Code not to make medical experimentations with civilian populations, this already forfeited. Or the freedom of expression. Following an opinion considered not to be true by the government in Germany, people had been arrested. So forfeited. The freedom of self-defense of oneself or one's family, when Macron said he doesn't believe in it because he has a bodyguard, but the bodyguard can't defend himself, so I suppose the logic, you either can afford a bodyguard or you are like Jews since 2019, the Limit Rohr decision, not a real human being in France. The freedom to travel with lockdowns or carbon tracking, except for 1% of the global population that is responsible for 50% of the pollution only done by transport, if you only count this one. Hashtag kerosene and private jet to Davos. The freedom of demonstration when Le Croix even shoots at people that are susceptible to plant a potato. But in France, they had freedom of expression had been a thing for 24 hours after the death of Professor Patty, but then he changed his mind, and then we saw also hand amputations with a club under Macron. So the argument being that otherwise we have under Putin the same totalitarian restrictions which are now introduced in Europe without Putin. Wonderful. Anyway, against the fascists in the Ukraine, Putin engages from all groups the Wagner Group, and for freedom engages Europe's Daesh. Wow. It is necessary to introduce, in my opinion, capitalism for all, not only for the corrupt, with a free market like slaves in Xinjiang are not free participants of a free market. and for freedom for all with the equivalent of obligations for all, not like guilty until proven Democrat. So that there is something to defend. Look at Israel, for example. You had the Yom Kippur War against 5 nations that had been super equipped with this by the Soviet Union, or the 1948 Foundation War, also against super equipped by the Soviet Union, or the 6 Days Wars, and always, even with very bad equipment and a proportion of 200 to 1, they won because they had been motivated. So motivation might be a thing, huh? And though I have expressed myself with strong economic consequences against President Macron, what I consider criminal behavior. I mean, I wrote you about side effects of certain product, and then I was only after an hour blocked from your site directly. But I feel flattered by the effort against a 3 times nothing like me. It's a really impressive overkill. Despite all this, Macron's the only one who has, at least temporary, maybe long term, the lucidity to propose an alternative to. And I think like killing everybody is not so nice. Elon Musk's peace proposals were criticized. That were by the same conditions of the peace talks between Zelensky and Putin in March 2022. And there you had an independent Donbass, okay, but all Russian troops would have been withdrawn from Ukraine. But in the last days of his office, the former Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson, also an alumni of Klaus Schwab, of the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum paid almost all the electoral campaigns of their former members. In the case of Macron, that was via McKinsey. So Boris Johnson intervened to avoid peace. Just after 250,000 people had been now slaughtered, and we are before the nuclear and we are before the total annihilation of humankind, or womankind, or what you ever say. What did Schwab alumni Johnson put on the table of the Klaus Schwab alumni Zelensky to pressure him to keep war? Just a question. Another thought. Now Ukraine asked for Israel to send the Iron Dome missile system, which is only useful if you first shoot at you, if somebody is first shooting at you missiles, because it reacts only to missiles. So maybe the expenses for, if you thought you don't want Ukraine to be aggressed, instead of financing the Operation Polaris, the Iron Dome directly in the end of 2021 would be an idea. Don't know, but I'm sure you had the best intentions. Like, it would be nice not slaughtering all humankind. And it's convenient to lose the train of thought when it's too complicated at precise the moments. Facts point to personal responsibility. To think, because you need the time to think about more important things, like how we proletarians think about the image you have invented to presenting yourself instead of liking yourself. This one is called in psychiatry narcissistic personality disorder, which is a waste of energy and autoaggressive. You always have to attack yourself, your actual self, to protect your mask. Because you think but because you don't understand that every person has something likable in you. And this is very visible to all of us, and a torture from you, politician, to yourself, to the detriment of all others. But it's treatable. All of my videos, I explain the principle of teshuva: confront errors, correct errors, ask and receive forgiveness, and overcome errors. It's like the anonymous alcoholic. But this doesn't fit with cancel culture, doesn't it? So what?